Mrs. Ellis slapped a stapled packet onto the desk hard enough to make my D- slide 3 inches toward the edge. "If you're serious about this," she said, tapping the aviation program requirements with one finger, "then stop asking whether you want it and start asking what it requires." I caught the test before it fell. That sounded dangerously close to encouragement. It wasn't. She pulled another sheet from the stack. Mathematics prerequisites. Physics recommended. Graduation requirements. Entrance assessment. Medical certification. Physical standards. Fees. Then, on the last page, tuition. Until recently, anyone at Westbridge would have laughed if I'd said the words physics, fitness standards, and aviation belonged anywhere near my future. Honestly, I probably would have laughed with them. Now I was sitting across from the toughest teacher in school trying to figure out what it would cost to become someone who could earn her way into the sky. I stared at the number. Okay, that one feels hostile. Mrs. Ellis didn't smile. "You came in here at 7:25 in the morning and asked if you could change." I was sleep-deprived. "Would you like to withdraw the question?" My mouth opened. Nothing came out. Through the narrow glass panel in the classroom door, someone moved in the hallway. Tyler. He stopped when he saw me, one hand wrapped around a paper cup. For half a second, everything in me reacted before I could stop it. The familiar pull, the stupid relief, the part of me that still knew exactly how his face changed when he was worried. He didn't knock. He didn't come in. A freshman nearly walked into him, and Tyler stepped aside, let the kid pass, then looked back through the glass. Mrs. Ellis followed my eyes. Problem. Complicated question. I teach algebra, not miracles. I looked back at the packet. Good. Because apparently I need physics too. She dragged a chair out across from her desk. "Seat. You set." She turned the packet toward me. "Right now, your math grade is nowhere near where it needs to be. Strong opening. Your physics background is weak. Getting better. You haven't demonstrated the study habits necessary for either." I put a hand over my heart. And there goes the recovery. Her eyes stayed on mine. "You also have to graduate." I was hoping they'd overlook that. They won't. She moved down the page. "There are medical requirements. Fitness standards. Testing. Application costs. And even if you meet all of those, there's the larger financial question." I looked again at the tuition. The joke didn't come this time. I thought about $80 tucked under an electric bill. Weekend shifts. My cracked phone. Mom moving envelopes around the kitchen table like rearranging them might make the numbers kinder. Mrs. Ellis watched me quietly. "Still serious?" she asked. I picked up my D- and placed it beside the admissions packet. Red, ink next to clean black print. 2 versions of my life, sitting 6 inches apart. How long? For what? To get from this, I tapped the D- to whatever that needs. There's no honest answer to that. I frowned. That's inconvenient. You're looking for a schedule that guarantees an outcome. Schedules are kind of new for me. I thought I'd start ambitious. You can make a schedule. You can't make a guarantee. I leaned back. So, what can I make? Mrs. Ellis slid a blank legal pad toward me. A plan. I looked down at the empty page. Tyler had always been good at plans. Chicago. Apartment downtown. Business school. 2 dogs. Me somewhere inside the picture, because he loved me enough to assume I belonged there. My phone buzzed against the desk. "Tyler, I'm outside." I turned it face down. Mrs. Ellis noticed. She didn't ask. I wrote math at the top of the page. Under it, physics, graduate, fitness, medical, test, money. The list looked less like a plan than a threat. "There," I said. My entire personality has become a hostage situation. "You forgot deadlines." I glared at her and added deadlines. Happy. Not particularly. She pulled my old review sheet from a folder. "Start here." I took it. Many hours a day. Enough to learn. Not enough to pretend exhaustion is the same thing as progress. That irritated me because it sounded useful. By the time I left the classroom, first bell was 10 minutes away. Tyler was gone. For one sharp second, disappointment hit before I could tell myself I had asked for distance. Then I saw the paper cup sitting on the floor beside the wall, exactly where I would notice it, but nowhere near the doorway. My name was written across the lid in black marker. No note.
No επάλεγη.
No request to talk. I picked it up. Still warm. 2 sugars.
No whipped cream.
My phone buzzed once more. Tyler, good luck today. That was all. I stood there with the aviation requirements under one arm, my D- folded inside them, and his hot chocolate warming my hand. Then I put the phone back in my pocket without answering and walked toward first period carrying both. Mrs. Ellis circled the D at the top of my retake, set her pen down, and said, "You spent 9 hours studying for this, and most of those hours were wasted." I stared at the page. Excellent. I was worried the D might hurt my feelings by itself. She turned the test around and pointed to 3 problems where my work looked suspiciously identical. "Tell me why you use this formula here." "Because that's the formula for this kind of problem." "Why?" I looked at the equation, then at her. "Because someone smarter than me invented it." "Lena." I memorized it. Exactly. She tapped the next problem. And when this question changed the structure slightly, what happened? I had used the same formula anyway and created something mathematically offensive enough to deserve its own warning label. I sank lower in the chair. So I studied wrong. You practiced recognizing shapes. You didn't learn what they meant. The classroom clock clicked toward 7:40. I had spent almost every morning that week here before school, then another hour or 2 at home after work. My notebook had color-coded tabs now. I owned flashcards. I had even downloaded an app that yelled reminders at me with alarming enthusiasm. I had treated hours like currency. Put enough in, get a better grade out. Mrs. Ellis pulled a clean sheet of paper toward us. "Explain this problem to me. You already know how to do it. I want to know whether you do." I reached for my pencil. She covered the page with her hand. Without solving it, that felt cruel. "What am I supposed to do, interview it? Tell me what the equation is asking." I read it twice. The symbols stayed symbols. My face warmed. Usually this was where I made the joke bigger, got the laugh, and escaped before anyone could see how lost I was. Mrs. Ellis simply waited. Her expression carried no pity and no amusement. Just patience with standards attached. "I don't know," I said. The words landed harder than they should have. Mrs. Ellis nodded once.
Good.
That is a deeply upsetting response.
It's honest.
Now we can work with it. She drew a line under the equation and broke the problem into pieces, asking me what each term represented before letting me touch the pencil. By the 3rd attempt, I could explain half of it. By the 5th, most of it. By the 6th, I caught my own mistake before she did. Mrs. Ellis leaned back. "There." I looked at the corrected line. "There what?" "You learned something." The D still sat at the corner of my retake. Somehow it looked less like a verdict and more like an extremely rude starting point. That afternoon, I went straight from school to the diner. I carried coffee, refilled ketchup bottles, balanced 4 plates on one arm, and spent my break with a physics book open beside a basket of fries I forgot to eat. After closing, I came home smelling like coffee and fryer oil and found Mom, Rachel to everyone else, folding laundry at the kitchen table. She watched me drop my backpack onto the chair and pull out my notebook. "Quadratic equations?" she asked. "Among other crimes." "Still absolutely not." "Your honesty continues to inspire me." She slid a plate toward me. A sandwich, cut in half, with the crust still on because she refused to indulge what she called my childhood propaganda campaign against bread edges. "Eat first."
Ai fine.
She pushed the plate another inch. That wasn't a survey. I ate while reviewing the same problem Mrs. Ellis had made me explain that morning. Mom folded 2 towels, glanced over, then quietly moved the laundry basket off the table so I had more room. An hour later, my forehead touched my textbook. I woke to the scrape of a chair. Mom sat across from me with the electric bill and a calculator, working through numbers in silence. My book had shifted beneath my cheek. A blanket covered my shoulders. I sat up. How long was I out? 20 minutes. "Why didn't you wake me?" "Because you were asleep." Fair point. My phone lit beside my elbow. Tyler's name appeared with a message asking how the retake went. I read it, thumb hovering over the screen, then set the phone beside the book. Mom noticed the movement and returned to her calculator. She gave me the privacy of pretending she hadn't seen anything. The next morning, I slid into Mrs. Ellis's classroom with yesterday's test in one hand and a fresh page of problems in the other. I redid all the ones I missed. She held out her hand. I gave her the pages. And she asked. I took the chair across from her desk. And I can tell you why this time. Mrs. Ellis picked up her pen. Start talking. I looked at the D again before turning to the first equation. It was one letter higher than the grade I'd started with, and for the first time, that tiny difference felt like evidence. The invitation hit my phone while I was standing in front of my mirror, wearing the black top Sophie had once declared legally incapable of being boring. Maths. 8:30. Everyone's coming. Under it, Sophie had added, if you say you're studying again, I'm reporting you missing. I looked at my reflection, then at the physics workbook open on my desk behind me. 3 unfinished problems waited beneath a yellow sticky note from Mrs. Ellis that read, explain the concept before you touch the formula. Cruel woman, I muttered. My phone buzzed again. Sophie, I know you're dressed already. She knew me too well. I picked up my jacket, slipped one arm into it, and reached for the physics book with the other hand. The next exam sat 4 days away, and the C- on my latest progress report had felt almost obscene after years of red ink. A C-. I had stared at it long enough for Mrs. Ellis to ask whether I needed medical attention.
My phone rang. Sophie.
I answered on speaker and dropped onto the edge of the bed. Before you start, I would like it formally recognized that I am wearing real pants. Great. Put shoes on. I have shoes. Then why are you still home? Music thumped faintly behind her voice. People shouted somewhere nearby. I could picture the whole thing without trying. The kitchen packed shoulder to shoulder, Ryan saying something stupid, someone turning the living room into a dance floor, Sophie, already holding a drink she'd abandoned somewhere within 10 minutes. My body knew that world. It felt easy in a way quadratic equations never had. I have physics. Silence. Then Lena. That tone feels judgmental. You studied this morning. Correct. And yesterday. Also correct. And Thursday. I'm sensing a pattern. I'm serious. Her voice softened. You're allowed to have a life. I looked at the workbook. I have one. Do you? That landed harder than she intended. I stood and paced once across the room, jacket still hanging from one arm. Sophie, I'm trying to get my grades up. I know. I'm proud of you. I'm also wondering when studying became a punishment you have to serve every night. It hasn't. Then come for an hour. The offer was reasonable. That made it worse. I wanted to go. I wanted somebody to yell my name when I walked in. I wanted music loud enough to erase every formula I had spent the week forcing into my head. I wanted to laugh without calculating what the next 2 years might cost. My phone vibrated with another message while Sophie waited. Tyler, you coming tonight? I read it twice. Sophie heard the silence. Is that him? Maybe. That means yes. Tyler sent another message. Ryan says if you don't show up, he's taking your social status. I smiled before I could help it. I typed back, tell Ryan he can have Thursdays. 3 dots appeared. Only Thursdays?
Greedy.
The ease of it moved through me like muscle memory. I could almost hear Tyler's voice. Then another message appeared. Seriously though, you okay? I looked down at the workbook again. Sophomore, yeah? If I come for an hour, I'm staying for 4. She gave a small laugh. Probably. And tomorrow I'll tell myself I'll catch up. Probably. And then I'll hate physics because physics ruined my night when technically I ruined it myself. That also sounds like you. Thank you for your support. Always. I pulled my arm back out of the jacket and hung it over the chair. Sophie went quiet again. You're really staying home. I sat at the desk. Tonight. You're becoming deeply inconvenient. You'll adapt. I miss you. The words stripped the joke out of me. I turned the pencil between my fingers. I miss you too. Then don't disappear on me, okay?
I'm studying, Soph.
I'm not joining a monastery. You'd last 6 hours. For if they wake up early. She laughed, and the tightness in my chest loosened. Text me tomorrow. I will. And if you get a C, I'm taking credit. C- already.
Wait.
Seriously? I smiled at the page. Seriously. Lena Hayes got a C- in math. Please control yourself. I'm telling everyone. I will deny it. We hung up with both of us laughing, though something quieter remained underneath it. My phone lit again. Tyler. You're actually skipping? I typed, physics. His reply came fast. This is terrifying. I wrote, respect my growth. Another pause. Then, I do. That stopped me. A second message followed. Have fun being responsible. I hate it here already. I smiled, set the phone face down, and opened the workbook. For the first 10 minutes, I heard the party in my head anyway. On the 11th, I finally understood why the force in the problem changed when the mass did. I wrote the explanation in the margin before touching the formula. The room stayed quiet. Somewhere across town, my friends were having the kind of night I had always assumed would still be waiting for me whenever I wanted it. I sharpened my pencil, pulled the next problem closer, and kept my seat. The next afternoon, Mrs. Ellis sent me to the library because the physics review group met after school. By the time I arrived after arranging a shift change at the diner, everyone else had already paired off. I took one of the remaining seats and spent 20 minutes building what I thought was a perfectly respectable solution before a guy I had never met dropped into the empty chair across from me. He glanced at my worksheet, then at me. Why? He asked, and with one irritating syllable, he destroyed the solution I had spent 20 minutes building. I kept my pencil pressed to the page. Because that's the formula. That tells me what you used. He tapped the equation with the eraser end of his pencil. I asked why it works. I looked across the library table at him. Do you always interrogate people you just met? Only people trying to calculate acceleration by memorizing where numbers go. I liked you better before you spoke. We met 4 minutes ago.
Exactly.
Great 4 minutes. His mouth twitched, but he pushed my calculator away from my hand. Explain the situation first. A car accelerates from rest. What does that mean? It was emotionally unprepared for movement. This time he laughed. Velocity, Lena. 0. Good. What changes? I looked at the problem again. Mrs. Ellis had been doing this to me for weeks, forcing words between me and the formulas I wanted to hide behind. Noah was worse because he seemed genuinely interested in whether I understood. I drew a line beneath the variables. Velocity changes over time. So, what are you actually looking for? The rate of that change. Which is? I paused. Acceleration. He nodded and slid the calculator back. Now earn your formula. You make tutoring sound disturbingly personal. You make basic physics sound like a hostage negotiation. Chemistry usually goes better for me. The words left my mouth with the easy rhythm I'd used for years. Noah glanced up. He had calm brown eyes and absolutely none of the flustered reaction I was accustomed to getting when I turned the charm on. Is that your way of telling me you're better at chemistry? He asked. That depends. Are you asking academically? He held my gaze for one beat, then smiled. Solve the problem, Hayes. I smiled too, annoyed by how much I enjoyed losing that round. 20 minutes later, I got another answer wrong. Noah drew a small X beside it. You guessed. I calculated. You calculated after guessing what the problem wanted. That feels like an unnecessarily precise accusation. It's accurate. Heat crept into my face. I erased hard enough to wrinkle the paper. I know I'm behind. His expression changed. The teasing dropped away without turning into pity. I didn't say you were behind. You didn't have to. I expected reassurance. Instead, he rotated the worksheet toward himself. Show me where you stopped understanding it. I stared at him. That could be embarrassing. Then we'll survive something together. A laugh escaped me. I pointed to the second line. Here. Okay. He moved his chair slightly closer so we could both see the page, leaving enough space between us that the gesture stayed practical. Start there. I explained what I understood. He interrupted every time I substituted a memorized rule for an actual reason. Why does the sign change? Why does mass matter? What happens if you double the time? Each why made me want to throw something at him. Then one of them clicked. I stopped mid-sentence and looked at the diagram. Wait. Noah stayed quiet. I drew the forces again, changed one value, and worked through the equation. The numbers lined up because I understood what they represented, not because I recognized the arrangement from a flashcard. I checked the answer, then checked it again. Oh my God. Noah leaned back. What? It makes sense. Tragic. I pointed my pencil at him. You knew this would happen. I had concerns you might accidentally learn physics. I laughed, and the feeling surprised me. Getting an answer right had always meant escaping being wrong. This felt different. I wanted another one. I pulled the next problem toward me before Noah could. Give me a harder one. His eyebrows rose. You sure?
Please.
I survived your personality. He opened the review packet and selected a problem farther down the page. Explain every step. You really know how to ruin a moment, and yet you're still here. My phone vibrated beside my notebook. Tyler's name flashed across the screen. For a second, the familiar pull returned. I turned the phone over and looked back at Noah. Okay, I said, drawing the first diagram. Ask me why. Noah rested his pencil on the table and waited for me to begin. Mrs. Ellis placed the physics assessment on my desk face up, and the number at the top hit harder than the D- ever had. I had studied for this one. I had skipped a party for this one. I had spent lunch periods arguing with acceleration formulas, dragged myself through diner shifts with flashcards in my apron pocket, and let Noah ask why so many times I had started hearing his voice in my sleep. The score still sat there in red, low enough to make every hour feel ridiculous. Tell me what happened, Mrs. Ellis said. I kept my eyes on the page. Apparently physics and I have decided to see other people. She waited. The joke fell flat between us. I swallowed and tried again. I knew this material. Some of it. I knew enough to do better than this. That's true. Somehow that hurt worse. She pulled the paper closer and pointed to the section where my work had unraveled. You understood the principles here. Then you rushed. Another mark. Here you misread the condition. Another. And here you panicked after the previous mistake and carried it forward. I stared at the red lines. Every error had my fingerprints on it. Laziness would have been easier. A bad teacher would have been easier. Even bad luck would have given me somewhere to put the anger. Mrs. Ellis folded her hands. You can learn from this. I looked up. Can I? Her expression stayed steady. If you come back. I shoved the assessment into my bag before my face could give me away. After school, I changed into running clothes behind the gym and tried the mile benchmark again. My legs burned before I reached halfway. By the final lap, my breathing had turned ragged, my pace collapsing while two younger students passed me without looking strained. I crossed the line, bent over with my hands on my knees, and checked the time. Still nowhere close. My phone buzzed before I'd caught my breath. A reminder from the aviation program sat above a fee notice I had saved earlier that week. Application. Testing. Medical. More numbers. More money. I laughed once, because apparently humiliation liked company. Then another message appeared. Noah. How'd it go? I stared at the screen until sweat cooled along my back.
No, Alina? I typed the fine.
Deleted it. Typed bad. Deleted that too. Finally, don't. His reply came a minute later. Okay. I respect that. If you want help later, I'm around. I shoved the phone into my bag. The kindness made my throat tighten more than pressure would have. By the time I finished my diner shift, my feet ached and my tips barely covered what I had already set aside for one of the upcoming fees. I came home carrying the physics assessment folded into quarters. Mom sat at the kitchen table with bills spread in front of her. She looked at my face, then at the bag hanging from my shoulder. Rough day. Outstanding. Really building character. She studied me for another second. There's soup. Thanks. She returned to the bills. She gave me room without pretending she hadn't noticed. Upstairs, I dropped the assessment on my desk beside the aviation requirements. D- had once looked like rock bottom. Now I had something worse, evidence that I could work harder than I ever had and still fail. My phone lit again. Tyler's name. For 1 second, my thumb moved automatically. Tyler had always known how to make bad nights smaller.
A drive.
A joke. Hot chocolate. Somewhere I could sit while he told me the world would probably work out. I opened his contact and stared at the call button. Then I locked the phone and set it down. The physics book waited beside my elbow. I opened it to the chapter from the assessment. The first diagram looked familiar. I knew what it meant. That almost made me angry. I turned the page.
More formulas. More notes in my handwriting.
Hours of them. My eyes burned. I closed the book. The sound was quiet, almost polite. I stacked the physics workbook beneath the math packet, pushed both to the far corner of the desk, and pulled the aviation requirements out from underneath them.
Math.
Physics. Fitness. Medical. Testing. Money. For months, that list had looked difficult. Tonight it looked stupid. Too big. Too expensive. Too far away from who I actually was. I took Dad's watch off my wrist and placed it beside the papers. Then I shut the laptop with the aviation page still open. Mom paused outside my doorway. Her hand touched the frame once. You want company? I looked at the closed books. I want to be done. Her face tightened, but she nodded. Okay. She walked away. I sat alone until the house went quiet, surrounded by everything I had worked for and wanted nothing to do with anymore. For the first time since I chose the sky, quitting felt less like failure than relief. I drove past the airport twice before I finally turned in. The first time, I told myself I had missed the entrance. The second time, I ran out of excuses. I parked beside a chain-link fence, killed the engine, and sat there with both hands around the steering wheel while a small white training plane rolled toward the runway. I had shoved Dad's watch back onto my wrist that morning without thinking. The cracked black face caught the light when I lifted my hand. Somewhere beyond the fence, an engine climbed in pitch. The airplane accelerated, lifted, and for a few seconds I forgot the physics assessment folded in my bag, the mile time I hated, the fees I couldn't afford, and the books I had pushed away the night before. Then the plane banked into the pale sky, and all of it came back. I got out anyway. The terminal was smaller than I expected, more like a tired office building than the doorway to somebody's dream. Through the windows, 2 training aircraft sat near the apron while a student in a headset followed an instructor across the pavement. I bought a vending machine coffee that tasted like warm regret and carried it to a bench facing the runway. That bad? A voice asked. I looked over. A man in his 60s stood a few feet away holding a weather printout and a battered flight bag. Gray hair. Sunglasses tucked into his shirt collar. The kind of calm posture that made everyone else look hurried. I lifted the paper cup. I've had worse coffee. I meant the expression. That's less polite. He smiled and sat at the opposite end of the bench. For a while, we watched a little Cessna touch down hard enough to bounce, once before climbing again. The engine rose sharply. Why'd he go back up? I asked. Landing wasn't right. So he messed it up. The man glanced at me. He corrected it. The airplane circled back toward the pattern. I looked down at my cup. Convenient wording. Accurate wording. He unfolded the weather sheet, checked something, then folded it again. You training here? Absolutely not. That came out too fast. He waited. I rubbed my thumb over the cracked edge of Dad's watch. I thought about it. Past tense. I watched the Cessna turn toward the runway again. I'm trying harder than I've ever tried at anything. He nodded once. And my throat tightened. I'm still bad at it. The words sounded worse out loud. Math. Physics. Running. Apparently even being broke requires organization. He almost smiled. Busy list. I had a shorter one yesterday. It just said quit. He looked toward the runway instead of at me, which somehow made talking easier. You know what wind does to an airplane? Moves it. Constantly. He pointed toward a windsock snapping at an angle. You pick a heading. Wind pushes you off it. You correct. Then it changes and you correct again. I frowned. So the whole job is being wrong repeatedly? That's one interpretation. I prefer it. The Cessna came in again. This time the descent looked smoother, but the wheels touched, skipped lightly, and the plane climbed away once more. I stared. Again? Again. Is he bad? The man rested his forearms on his knees. He's learning. Something in me went very still. The student wasn't being removed from the airplane. Nobody was pointing at him like his mistakes had exposed some permanent truth. He was circling back. The instructor beside him was still there. The runway was still there. Another chance waited because learning apparently included being terrible at something in public and continuing anyway. I looked at the windsock. Nobody holds the exact course the whole way? Nobody. Then how do you know you're getting anywhere? You keep checking where you are. He tapped the folded weather paper against his palm. Then you make the correction you can make. My coffee had gone cold. I set it beside the bench. That sounds annoyingly reasonable. Most useful things do. A radio crackled from somewhere inside the terminal. The man stood and picked up his flight bag. Good luck with your list. You don't even know what I'm trying to do. He shrugged. You came to an airport after quitting. I figured you weren't finished arguing with yourself. Then he walked toward the flight school door and left me with that. The Cessna turned final a third time. I watched the nose settle, watched the wheels meet the runway and stay there. The airplane rolled out cleanly. I looked at Dad's watch, then at my reflection in the dark window beside me.
My phone stayed in my bag.
Tyler could not answer this. Noah could not explain it. Mrs. Ellis could not grade it. Mom could not protect me from it. I pulled the physics assessment from my bag, unfolded it across my knees, and found the first place where my work had gone wrong. I circled it with my pen. Then the next one. Then the next. By the time the training plane taxied past the window, I had a page full of corrections and, for the first time in 24 hours, somewhere to begin. I opened the physics book before I took off my jacket. The stack I had shoved into the corner the night before was still there, exactly where quitting had left it, and the first problem I chose was one I had already gotten wrong twice. I worked through it slowly. The answer came out wrong again. I checked the diagram, found the point where I had treated velocity like acceleration, erased half the page, and started over. Off course.
Correct. Continue.
The second attempt got farther. The third worked. I circled the answer, then wrote beside it. Why? I could practically hear Noah saying it. By midnight, I had filled 3 pages with explanations instead of memorized steps. Mom passed my doorway once carrying laundry, glanced at the open book, and kept walking. 10 minutes later, a glass of water appeared beside my elbow. She left it there without turning the moment into a speech. The next morning, I ran before school. My mile time still offended me personally. I bent over at the finish, lungs burning, checked the stopwatch, and wrote the number in the little notebook I had started keeping in my jacket pocket. Worse than I wanted. Better than last week. I walked 1 lap, caught my breath, and circled tomorrow's date. By 7:45, I was in Mrs. Ellis's room with yesterday's corrected physics assessment spread across her desk. She looked at the notes filling the margins. You went through every mistake. I had a deeply emotional evening with Newton. She pointed to one correction. Explain this. I did. She moved to another. I explained that too. Her expression barely changed, but she stopped reaching for her red pen. You understand these. Eventually. Eventually counts. I looked at her. A week ago, I would have taken that as consolation. Today it sounded like a standard I could work with. At lunch, I found Noah at the library table where we usually studied. He looked up from his notebook when I dropped my bag onto the chair across from him. Hey. Hey. There was a carefulness in his voice that hadn't been there before I told him to leave me alone. He gave me exactly what I had asked for, and somehow that made walking back harder. I pulled out the physics assessment and pushed it toward him. Show me where I went wrong. His eyes moved from the paper to me. You sure? I reserve the right to complain aggressively. That part was never in question. The corner of his mouth lifted. Relief moved through me, small and embarrassing. Noah picked up his pencil and studied the first page. You already corrected most of it. Mrs. Ellis checked those. And these?
Mean it.
He nodded once. Okay, start here. I leaned over the page. I treated the initial velocity like it stayed constant. Why? I gave him a look. You missed me. Answer the question. I explained it. He listened, then tapped the next line. And here? I panicked. That's emotionally honest and mathematically useless. I laughed. I really did miss you. The words slipped out before I could decide whether they were too much. Noah's pencil paused. He looked at me, expression softer now. I figured you needed space. I did. Okay. And I was kind of awful about it. You were having a bad day. Bad week. Still. He returned his attention to the page, giving me the mercy of keeping the moment small. I watched him for half a second longer than necessary. Then I pointed at the equation. Ask me why. Over the next few weeks, the pattern stopped feeling dramatic. That was the strange part. I studied. I got things wrong. I corrected them. I ran.
My time disappointed me.
I ran again. Mrs. Ellis stopped accepting answers I couldn't explain. Noah stopped giving me hints until I had told him exactly where my reasoning broke. Mom stopped reminding me to study because the books were already open when she came home. When my next math grade came back, I stared at the C written across the top until Mrs. Ellis cleared her throat. Problem. I'm waiting for someone to tell me this belongs to another Lena Hayes. I checked. Rude. Accurate. I smiled and slipped the paper into my notebook. That afternoon, Noah found me rewriting a physics problem before he sat down. He glanced at the C beside my elbow and smiled. Nice. Try to contain yourself. I'm deeply moved. He opened his own book. Need help? I looked at the equation, traced the point where my answer had gone sideways, and erased one line. Give me a minute. Noah leaned back and waited. I tried again. The number on the application page looked smaller than tuition and somehow scared me more.
Testing fee. Medical exam.
Transportation.
Books.
Then another line for an application charge. I had somehow missed the first 6 times I read the requirements. I grabbed a pen, added everything again, and stared at the total. That seems personal, I said. Mom looked up from the other side of the kitchen table. How bad? I turned the notebook toward her. Her eyes moved down the column, then back up. That's before tuition? Apparently they want money, before they even decide whether they want more money. She picked up the calculator and started entering numbers. I watched her hand pause over the buttons when she reached our monthly expenses. Lena. I knew that tone. Don't. I was going to say we can figure something out. That's a nicer version of the same tone. Her mouth tightened. I should be able to help you with this. The sentence sat between us beside the electric bill and my aviation notebook. A few months earlier, I probably would have heard accusation in it. This time I saw her thumb rubbing the worn edge of the calculator. You already are. Groceries and reminding you to sleep don't pay application fees. They keep me alive long enough to complain about them. She gave me a tired look. I reached across the table and took the calculator from her. Mom, I'm not asking you to fix it. I know. Do you? She held my eyes for a second, then nodded. I'm learning. That answer softened something in me. The next afternoon, I asked the diner manager for 2 extra evening shifts. By Friday, my schedule looked like someone had designed it as a punishment. School, run, diner, homework, sleep, repeat. Vanessa called Saturday morning with another modeling job, this time a catalog shoot for a local department store. Long day, she warned. Good rate. How good? She told me. I sat up straighter. I suddenly believed deeply in fashion. Vanessa laughed. Call time is 7. If you take it, I need you alert and on time. You'll get both. The shoot lasted 8 hours beneath hot lights while I changed jackets, shoes, sweaters, and expressions on command. Vanessa treated me exactly the same way she always had, professionally, which I appreciated more now. During a break, she handed me the next call sheet. You're reliable, she said. Clients remember that. The compliment landed differently than being told I photographed well. I folded the paper carefully and slid it into my bag. By Monday, reliability had become harder to perform. I woke before sunrise to run, worked through school, covered a dinner shift, then stayed up past 11 with my physics notes spread across the kitchen table. The next day at the library, I made it halfway through a forced diagram before my forehead settled onto my folded arm. Lena. I lifted my head. Noah sat across from me, holding my notebook just out of reach. You just fell asleep in the middle of a calculation. I blinked at the page. Advanced study technique. He turned the notebook toward me. You drooled on Newton's second law. We're close. He studied me instead of laughing. How much sleep did you get? Enough to remember my name. That wasn't the question. 5 hours. Maybe. He pulled the chair out across from me but left my worksheet untouched. You're going to burn yourself out. Financially, I can't afford the luxury. I'm serious. I rubbed both hands over my face. So am I. Noah's expression stayed calm. Want me to help you rearrange the study schedule? The offer carried no rescue in it, just a practical question. I looked at the pages between us. Maybe, but I still do the work. I assumed that. That mattered. Later that afternoon, Tyler caught me outside school with my diner uniform folded over one arm. His eyes went to the aviation fee sheet sticking out of my binder. You need money for this stuff? That is traditionally how fees work. Lena. He lowered his voice. I can help. I knew exactly what he meant. Tyler could cover the testing fee without noticing it missing. His father probably spent more than that on dinner. For one dangerous second, relief rushed through me. Then I handed him back the paper he had taken. Thank you. So let me. I said thank you, not yes. His face tightened with concern. This isn't charity. I know. Then why make it harder? I adjusted the diner shirt on my arm. Because I need to know I can carry this. Tyler looked like he wanted to argue, then stopped himself. Okay. The restraint mattered too. That night, I came home after closing and found Mom at the table with a thermos, 2 envelopes, and my weekly schedule. I switched my grocery shift Thursday, she said. You can take the car for your appointment. I looked at her. You didn't have to do that. I know. She pushed the thermos toward me.
Coffee.
Drink this tomorrow, not tonight. I smiled. Growth. For both of us. She gathered the bills and left the aviation notebook where it was. I opened it, crossed out transportation for Thursday, recalculated the remaining total, and wrote my modeling pay beside my diner tips. The numbers still looked ugly. My eyes still burned. The sky still cost more than I had. I picked up my pencil anyway and kept counting. Tyler was waiting outside the diner when I came off shift, holding 2 paper cups and looking entirely too familiar for someone I had worked very hard to keep at a safe emotional distance. Before you panic, he said, lifting 1 cup. I brought a peace offering. I took it automatically, caught the smell of chocolate, and looked at him. That is aggressively manipulative. 2 sugars. You remembered. You've complained about whipped cream enough to qualify as a public campaign. I took a sip.
No whipped cream.
Warm enough to sting my tongue. For a second, the months between us folded strangely. I was 17 again, leaning against his Mustang while he told me Chicago was waiting for us. Then my diner apron shifted under my jacket, and the aviation fee sheet crinkled inside my bag. Tyler noticed both. You look exhausted. Thank you. Vanessa spent 8 hours making me look expensive on Saturday, so I appreciate you restoring balance. Modeling too? Turns out planes continue refusing to pay for themselves. He smiled, but his eyes stayed on me as we started walking toward Main Street. You really are doing all of it. That sounded judgmental. It wasn't. He glanced at my running shoes hanging from my bag. School, diner, shoots, running, studying. Occasionally sleeping. Very exclusive hobby. I'm proud of you.
The words slowed me.
Tyler had praised me plenty before.
Pretty.
Funny.
Impossible.
He had defended me when people laughed at my grades, but back then his faith had always sounded like I would land somewhere because I was me. This felt different. He was looking at the work. Careful, I said. You're getting emotionally responsible. Terrifying, right?
Deeply.
He bumped his shoulder lightly against mine. I let him. We ended up on the bleachers behind Westbridge, mostly because neither of us suggested anywhere else. The field was empty, the stadium lights dark, our breath faint in the cold. Tyler sat beside me, with his elbows on his knees. I saw you running here last week. Please delete that memory. You looked miserable. That part can stay. You came back the next morning. I looked at him. You saw that too? Practice starts early. He shrugged. You used to hate mornings. I still hate mornings. Personal growth has limits. He laughed, and I laughed with him, and suddenly it was easy. Too easy. He told me about college applications. I made fun of one of his essays. He reminded me that I had once written an entire history paper the night before it was due, and somehow convinced the teacher the printer had changed my margins. I accused him of treason for remembering. His hand rested on the bench between us, close enough that I noticed. Mine stayed wrapped around the cup. I miss this, he said eventually. The field went very quiet. I looked at the track instead of him. Yeah, I miss us. My chest tightened. I could have lied. Tyler would have known. I miss us too. He turned toward me, and for a moment neither of us tried to make that sentence mean more than it did. His face had changed since the accident. Maybe mine had too. Less certainty in him. More caution in me. I've been trying to give you space, he said. I notice. It sucks. You're very brave. Thank you. His smile faded. I mean it, Lena. I know I screwed up. I met his eyes. I know. I'm trying to be better than that. I know that too. There it was, the difficult part. I believed him. He reached for my hand slowly, giving me plenty of time to decide. I turned my palm up. His fingers settled around mine, warm and familiar. The feeling went through me instantly. Home, almost. We could figure this out, he said. Eventually. I watched our hands. Maybe. Chicago doesn't have to look exactly like what I said before. My eyes lifted. Tyler kept going, hopeful now. I could do school there. You could train wherever makes sense, then we figure out the distance. Or maybe there's a program near Chicago. We can make it work.
We.
Every sentence began there even when the word didn't. I gently slipped my hand from his and wrapped it around my cup again. Tyler's expression changed. What? Nothing bad. That phrase has never introduced anything good. I smiled faintly. You're trying. I am. And I'm glad. I looked across the empty field. But I can't build this around us yet. He followed my gaze. Because you don't trust me? Partly. He absorbed that without defending himself. And partly because I finally have something I chose before I knew where you fit. That one hurt him.
I saw it. He nodded anyway.
Okay. I said I'm trying. A small smile returned. Apparently that includes hearing things I hate. I laughed softly. Tyler stood and took my empty cup with his. Want a ride home? I checked the time. I'm walking. I need the miles. Of course you do. He started away, then turned back. For what it's worth, I still think you're going to get there.
You don't know that.
Neither do you. He smiled. That's kind of the point, right? Then he walked toward the parking lot, taking both cups with him. I watched him go until the cold finally pushed me off the bleachers. I still loved him. The difference was that, for the first time, loving him didn't tell me where to go. The evaluator slid my score sheet across the desk and tapped one number with his pen. You missed the benchmark by 2 points.
2.
I stared at the total, then at the section breakdown underneath it. Not that long ago, a score like this would have flattened me. Today my eyes went straight to the damage. Physics reasoning, solid. Math, better than solid. Spatial section, one ugly cluster. Time management, worse than I expected. Can I see which questions I missed? I asked. He turned the assessment packet toward me. You can review them here. I pulled my chair closer and started marking the ones that cost me the score. Question 32. Read too fast. 38. Changed a correct answer because I panicked about time. 41. Misunderstood the diagram. 44. Left blank. The evaluator watched me write notes beside each one. You're taking this well. Give me 5 minutes. I'm considering a dramatic career in arson. His mouth twitched. I circled the blank question. How much time did I have left here? Less than 90 seconds. There it was. I had spent too long trying to make one problem perfect and starved the end of the test. Off course. I wrote time beside it and underlined the word twice. Outside, I sat on the curb with the score sheet across my knees. My phone buzzed first with Noah. How bad? I sent him a picture of the total. His reply came almost immediately. 2 points is rude. I smiled. Extremely. Want help going through it later? I looked at my handwritten notes. Already started. There was a pause before his answer.
Of course you did.
A second message followed. I'm around if you want another set of eyes. I typed thanks. I might. That was all I needed from him, and apparently all he needed from me. Tyler's message arrived 10 minutes later.
Heard today. Was the assessment.
You survive?
Barely.
Missed it by 2. His reply took longer. That sucks. Then, still proud of you. I read those 4 words, felt the familiar warmth, and put my phone away without needing them to become anything else. By Monday morning, Mrs. Ellis had my score sheet beside a stack of practice problems. She scanned my notes. You already identified the pattern. I rush when the clock gets ugly, then compensate by becoming emotionally attached to one problem. Accurate. I was hoping you'd argue. She pushed a timed practice set toward me. You're prepared, Lena. I looked up. Mrs. Ellis had never called me gifted. Somehow this felt better. Prepared people can still miss by 2 points. Yes. Comforting. Prepared means you have something to correct. I took the packet. There she is. The sunshine of Westbridge mathematics. At lunch, Noah timed me while I worked through a mix set. He kept his own notebook open and let silence do most of the work. When I got stuck, I marked the question and moved on. 20 minutes later, I came back to it with enough time to think. That's new, he said. Personal growth. Very upsetting. You're getting faster. Careful. Compliments make me reckless. His smile stayed for a second. Then he returned to his book. The ease between us felt different now, less like something I had to define, more like something I could simply let exist. That evening, Mom found me stretching on the living room floor after a run. I had finally finished the mile inside the target range twice that week, though the second time had involved language that would have embarrassed the Air Force. She stepped over my shoes and set grocery bags on the counter. When you go, you're taking those running shoes with you. I stopped stretching. When? Mom froze halfway through unloading a bag. What? You said when. She looked at the cereal box in her hands as if it had betrayed her. Don't make it weird. I smiled. Wouldn't dream of it. She set the cereal away and changed the subject, but the words stayed with me.
When?
Later, my desk held 3 things side by side. The assessment I had missed by 2 points, a timed practice set that had finally reached B range, and another one waiting for tomorrow. Once, almost enough would have sounded like proof that I had reached my limit. Now it looked like information. I set the timer, turned to the first page, and began again. The first question I didn't know how to answer on Mrs. Ellis's final physics exam was number 27. I stared at it long enough for the old panic to creep up my neck, the familiar urge to make a joke in my own head, guess something respectable, and keep pretending I understood more than I did. Instead, I marked it, moved on, and kept working. The room stayed painfully quiet except for pencils, page turns, and the clock dragging itself across the wall. Some questions came easily now. That still felt strange. Not that long ago, equations had looked like arguments between letters. Today I could see what most of them wanted from me before I touched the calculator. Then came another hard one. I worked it halfway, caught an error, erased the entire line, and rebuilt it.
Correct. Continue.
By the time I reached the last page, I had 4 minutes left and 2 questions waiting for me. One I solved. One I couldn't. My pulse kicked harder. For a second, the whole room seemed to narrow around that blank space. I read it again. Different wording. Same principle underneath. I drew the diagram, wrote what I knew, crossed out one assumption. Tried again. The answer still felt uncertain when time was called. I put the pencil down anyway. Mrs. Ellis collected the papers without ceremony. When she reached mine, our eyes met for half a second. There was no rescue in her expression, no promise. Just the same steady look she had given me when I brought her a D- and asked whether I could change. That afternoon, waiting for the result felt worse than taking the test. Noah found me in the library pretending to read the same paragraph for the fourth time. He sat across from me and opened his own book. You're vibrating. I'm radiating academic excellence. That must be what this is. I closed the textbook. There was one question I completely blanked on. One, maybe two.
I'm choosing optimism.
You finished the rest? Most of them. He nodded. Then you finished the rest. I looked at him. That sounded suspiciously supportive. I can be worse if you want. There he is. He smiled and went back to reading. He left the silence alone after that, which helped more than reassurance would have. The next morning, Mrs. Ellis called my name before first period and handed me the test face down.
You can look, she said.
I was considering carrying it unopened until retirement. That would be inconvenient for your transcript. I turned it over. B, just one letter. My throat closed anyway. I checked the score, then the grade again, as if both might change out of embarrassment. Mrs. Ellis reached into a folder on her desk and pulled out another paper. My original D-. She placed it beside the B. Red ink beside red ink. Same name at the top. For a second, I could only look at them.
D-, D-.
C, and now B. Mrs. Ellis leaned one hip against the desk. Well, I ran my thumb along the edge of the new test. I got one wrong that I should have gotten. Several, actually. I looked up. Thank you for preserving the moment. You asked for honesty. I continue regretting that. Her mouth moved slightly. Almost a smile. Then she tapped the B once. You earned this. The words landed quietly. That made them heavier. I folded the D- carefully and put it behind the new test instead of throwing it away. Mrs. Ellis watched me do it, keeping both. Evidence. Of what? I slid them into my notebook. Still working on that. She nodded once, and something in the gesture felt like respect rather than approval. Outside the classroom, I texted Mom first. B. Her reply came back in less than a minute. I knew you could do it. Then another message. Also, I have no idea what any of it means. I laughed out loud in the hallway. Noah was next.
Got the B.
3 dots appeared. Took you long enough. Then, proud of you. I smiled, tucked the phone away, and kept walking. Tyler's name sat farther down the screen. I left it there. This one belonged to the hours at the desk, the failed assessment, the runs that hurt, the corrections, the mornings I came back. It belonged to me before it belonged to anyone who might celebrate it. By lunch, the B was already folded into the same notebook that had once held my D-. The paper itself looked ordinary. That was the best part. It wasn't proof that I had secretly been brilliant all along. It was proof that I had learned how to stay. A few weeks later, graduation day arrived before the aviation program's decision did. Rachel, Mom to me, no matter how old I got, caught the crooked edge of my graduation cap with 2 fingers and said, "Hold still. You survived physics. You can survive a bobby pin." That feels medically unverified. She adjusted it anyway, smoothing one loose piece of hair behind my ear while the gym filled with families, camera flashes, and the kind of noise that made every voice sound too excited. My gown hung a little wrong at the shoulders. Sophie had already declared it a polyester crime, then disappeared to find her family. Somewhere beyond the double doors, the rest of Westbridge was arranging itself into rows and pretending none of us had spent 4 years trying to escape this place.
My phone sat in my hand.
I refreshed my email. Same screen. Same silence. Mom saw it. Again? I'm developing a meaningful relationship with disappointment. You submitted everything. I know. The test. Done. Medical. Done. Application. Done. Then breathe. I looked at her. You used to be the one asking what happens after graduation. Her hands paused on my collar. I remember. Now I have an answer, and apparently somebody in admissions is enjoying withholding it. She smiled faintly. That's still an answer. Before I could reply, Sophie pushed through the crowd in her gown, nearly taking out a folding chair. There you are. She grabbed both my shoulders. If you leave for pilot school and become too sophisticated for me, I'm releasing the 6th grade bangs photos. You've been threatening that for years. Because it works. I looked at her, really looked. Same Sophie. Same impossible energy. Different schedules, different priorities, fewer parties, more missed calls than either of us liked. Still here. You know I'm not disappearing, right? I said. Her expression softened. I know. Then she pointed at my cap. Your mother did that? Against my will. It's terrible. Rachel folded her arms. Fix it yourself. Sophie immediately backed away. It's perfect. We laughed, and for 1 minute the waiting loosened its grip. After the ceremony, the football field filled with people taking pictures under a bright afternoon sky. Jordan Price passed with 2 friends, saw the diploma in my hand, and slowed. For once, the grin came with a little embarrassment. So, he said, definitely college. I looked at him, then at the diploma. Looks that way. He gave me a small nod and kept walking. That was enough. The words that once would have followed me home could barely hold me in place for 5 seconds now. Noah found me near the bleachers while Mom and Sophie argued over photos. He held out a bottled water. You look overheated. Graduation is apparently an endurance sport. You passed the mile. I believe in you. I took the bottle. Careful. That sounded supportive. Temporary condition. He glanced at the diploma in my hand, then at me. You did good, Lena. I got very good at being average. That's not what I meant. I knew. That was the problem with Noah sometimes. He could say very little and still leave too much behind. I smiled. Thanks. He nodded toward my phone. Anything? Still waiting. You okay? I considered lying, then gave him the truth. I hate that there's nothing left to do. Makes sense. He let the answer stand. No solution.
No promise.
Just room. Text me when you know, he asked. I will. Tyler arrived a few minutes later in his gown with his tie already loosened. He looked from Noah to me, then simply said, Hey. Noah lifted one hand. Congrats. You too. The moment stayed clean. Nobody marked territory. Nobody turned me into a decision. Noah headed toward his family, and Tyler watched him go for half a second before looking back at me. You look happy. I'm sweating through rented polyester. Still. I looked down at my diploma. I am. Tyler smiled. You know what you want now. The words hit me because once, after the crash, he had thrown the opposite at me like it made my future lighter than his. You don't even know what you want yet. He remembered too. I could see it in his face. Yeah, I said.
Idag. I'm glad.
His voice stayed quiet. Even if it takes you somewhere I didn't plan for. I looked at him. That sounds painful for you. Extremely. I laughed. He smiled back, but neither of us used the moment to pretend the old future still fit. I still miss us, he said. I know. You. Sometimes. He nodded, accepting the size of the answer instead of reaching for more. Okay. My phone buzzed in my hand. Every muscle in my body tightened. I looked down. A promotional email from the diner. 50% off pie. Tyler read my face and laughed. Brutal. I hate everyone. He touched my shoulder once, brief and familiar. You did everything you could. I watched him walk back toward his family, then open the aviation portal one more time. Application complete. Decision pending. For once, there was no equation left to solve, no mile to rerun, no shift to pick up, no mistake to correct. I locked the phone, slipped it into my gown pocket, and walked back toward Mom and Sophie before the waiting could convince me it was the same thing as standing still. The email arrived 3 days after graduation while I was standing at the kitchen counter eating cereal straight from the box because every clean bowl in the house had apparently entered witness protection. My phone buzzed once beside Dad's watch, and I glanced at the screen expecting another diner schedule change. Instead, I saw the aviation program's name above a subject line that began with application decision. My hand stopped halfway into the cereal box. For several seconds, I simply stood there. Mom was at the table sorting receipts into envelopes, wearing the same tired concentration she used whenever numbers refused to cooperate. "Everything okay?" she asked. I picked up the phone. My thumb hovered over the message. Months of studying had taught me how to attack something difficult. Running had taught me how to keep moving while my lungs complained. Work had taught me how many hours a body could borrow from sleep before it started collecting interest. Waiting had taught me absolutely nothing useful. They emailed. Mom's hands went still. "The school?" I nodded. She pushed her chair back halfway, then caught herself and stayed where she was. The choice was so small I almost missed it. She wanted to come over. She let me open it myself. I tapped the message. The page loaded slowly enough to qualify as cruelty. Then the first line appeared. I read it. Read it again. Scrolled down because apparently I had lost the ability to trust English. My knees weakened and I leaned against the counter. Mom stood now. "Lena?" I handed her the phone. She read the same line I had. Her mouth opened, closed, then opened again. "You got in." I laughed once, though it came out dangerously close to crying. Apparently, they made a clerical error. Mom covered her mouth with one hand. Her eyes filled so quickly that I looked away before mine followed. "You got in," she repeated. This time she said it like she was testing whether the room could hold the sentence. I looked down at Dad's watch beside the cereal box. The leather strap was still cracked. The face still scratched. When I put it on, it still sat too loose on my wrist. Nothing about it had changed. I picked it up and fastened it anyway. Mom crossed the kitchen and stopped in front of me. "Can I hug you?" The question caught me harder than the acceptance letter. Months ago, she would have decided what I needed before asking. I nodded. "Yeah." She wrapped her arms around me, and I let myself fold into her for a few seconds. Her shoulders shook once. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "For what?" "That I couldn't make this easier." I pulled back enough to look at her. "You weren't supposed to." Her eyes searched mine. "I know that now." I smiled. "Growth." She laughed through tears. "For both of us." The wooden box still sat in the hall closet where we had returned it after everything came out about Dad. I opened it later that morning and lifted the silver wings from their place among the photographs and letters. They felt lighter than I remembered. For a long time, they had seemed like evidence of a life I had inherited without understanding. Today they looked different. His wings were his. The acceptance letter was mine. I set them beside each other on my desk, then took a picture of the email and sent it to Sophie. Her response arrived in 9 seconds. "I knew it," followed immediately by, "Actually, I did not know it at all, but I was emotionally committed to confidence." Then, "Do pilots get better hair rules than graduates?" I laughed and typed back, "I'm blocking you before takeoff." Her reply, "You'd miss me." She was right. Noah answered next. I sent him the screenshot without commentary. His response took slightly longer. "That's a lot of words for you were right to keep going." I stared at it, smiling. Then another message appeared. "Proud of you, Hayes." I stared at it for a second before typing. "You're getting dangerously sincere." His reply came back. "Don't spread it around." I smiled and set the phone down, the warmth of the exchange staying with me. Tyler's name sat farther down the screen. I looked at it for a while before sending the same screenshot. He called instead of texting. I answered. "Hey, you got in." His voice carried a smile I could hear.
"Yeah."
"Lena, that's huge. It feels mildly illegal."
He laughed.
Then a quiet pause settled between us. "I'm proud of you," he said. "Thank you. Really. I know I used to act like your future was something we'd just figure out around mine." I leaned against the edge of the desk. "You did." "I was an idiot."
"Frequently."
I walked into that. You usually do. Another laugh, softer. Wherever this takes you, he said. I hope you go. The words hurt and healed in the same place. Me too. Neither of us tried to turn them into a promise about us. That felt kinder than pretending. After we hung up, I carried the acceptance letter downstairs, printed now because Mom insisted important things deserved paper, and tucked it into the folder behind my B test. Behind that sat the C, the C-, the D, and finally the old D-, creased from being handled too many times. I spread them across the table in order. Mom came up behind me and rested one hand lightly on my shoulder. You keeping all of those? Evidence. Of what? I looked through the window, above the sink. A small airplane crossed high over the neighborhood, barely more than a white mark moving through blue. Once, I would have watched until it disappeared and wondered what kind of person belonged up there. I looked back at the papers. That earning the door and belonging on the other side are two different things. Mom waited. I smiled. I earned the door. I folded the letter, slid it into my bag, and tightened Dad's oversized watch around my wrist as far as the worn strap would allow. Then I stepped outside beneath the same sky I had spent years looking up at. This time, I had somewhere to go. If you stayed with Lena all the way to this moment, leave I made it in the comments. And tell me this, would you have kept going when the dream demanded more from you than you thought you could give? If her journey reminded you of a time you had to keep choosing your own path, share your experience below. Or send us your story if you'd like to see it told in a future video. Like and subscribe if you want to keep walking beside Lena. The door is open now, and stepping through it will bring a whole new chapter of choices. Thank you for being here with us.